the awakening. The Raymond Empire believed they had finally extinguished the last remnants of humanity, parading the cryogenically frozen soldiers as grim trophies of their victory. It was the year 2577, and for the past 2 centuries humans had been thought extinct, their once great civilization reduced to ashes after a brutal war with the ruthless Raymond Empire. Yet deep within the bowels of the Raymond flagship, a small flicker of hope remained. Unbeknownst to the arrogant aliens, 500 elite human soldiers lay in stasis, their bodies frozen in time, awaiting the day when they could rise and reclaim what was lost. These were no ordinary soldiers. They were the best of the best, humanity's last line of defense, prepared to avenge their fallen civilization. The Raymonds, drunk on their own perceived superiority, treated the cryopods like relics of a bygone era, showing them off as part of their grotesque celebrations. However, their hubris would soon prove to be their undoing. During one of these debauched festivities, a power surge rippled through the ship, causing alarms to blare and systems to falter. In the chaos, the emergency reanimation sequence was triggered. One by one, the cryopods hissed open, releasing wisps of icy vapor as the soldiers within began to stir. Led by Captain Paul Bailey, who quickly shook off the grogginess of 2 centuries of sleep, the human soldiers emerged with a singular purpose: to reclaim their place in the galaxy and exact revenge on the Empire that had sought to erase them from existence. A daring escape. As Captain Paul Bailey surveyed his surroundings, he realized that the odds were stacked against them. His team was outnumbered, unarmed, and trapped in the heart of the enemy's stronghold. The Raymond Empire, unaware of the soldiers' awakening, continued their revelry, oblivious to the danger now lurking within their own ship. Paul knew they had to move quickly if they were to have any chance of survival. He led his team through the labyrinthine maintenance tunnels, their footsteps echoing ominously in the dimly lit corridors. The air was thick with the stench of sweat, grease, and recycled oxygen, heightening the sense of desperation among the soldiers. Every corner they turned, every shadow they passed, could have been hiding an enemy, but they pressed on, driven by a fierce determination to live and fight another day. As they moved deeper into the bowels of the ship, Paul's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of light spilling from a partially open door. Signaling his team to halt, he crept forward, peering cautiously around the doorframe. What he saw brought a grim smile to his face, an armory stocked with sleek Raymond weapons waiting to be liberated. Inside, a lone guard sat idly at a desk, oblivious to the approaching danger. Paul signaled his team, and in a flash, they stormed the room. The guard barely had time to react before he was slammed against the wall, his eyes wide with terror. "Please don't kill me," he stammered. "I'm Czar, just a grunt. I swear I'm no threat." Paul, pressing his forearm against the guard's windpipe, eyed him coldly. "We're not here to kill you," he said, "but you're going to answer some questions." As the team secured the weapons, Paul began to interrogate Czar, who, despite his initial resistance, eventually broke under the relentless questioning. The information he provided was invaluable: deck plans, security codes, and most importantly, details about the ship's central computer core. Armed with this new intelligence, Paul formulated a bold plan. They would strike at the very heart of the ship's systems, disrupting the Raymond's control and creating the chaos needed for their escape. The humans knew they were outnumbered and outgunned, but with this daring plan, they were about to turn the tables on their captors. The first strike, with weapons in hand and a plan taking shape, Paul Bailey led his team toward the central computer core, the nerve center of the Raymond flagship. The corridors they traversed were eerily quiet, the distant hum of the ship's engines the only sound accompanying their tense march. Every step they took brought them closer to their objective, but also deeper into enemy territory. Czar, the Raymond guard who had decided to aid them, led the way, his knowledge of the ship's layout proving crucial. Despite his earlier fear, Czar now moved with a sense of purpose, his actions suggesting a deep-seated resentment toward the empire he once served. The humans, though wary, allowed him to guide them, recognizing the value of an insider's help. As they approached the core, the tension among the group was palpable. Was their make-or-break moment, failure was not an option. However, just as they reached the core, they encountered an unexpected challenge. The core was protected by an advanced AI firewall, far beyond anything the humans had anticipated. Mike Hawkins, the team's tech expert, worked furiously to bypass the security, but it was clear that this was no ordinary system. As precious minutes ticked away, Paul knew they were running out of time. In a desperate move, Zar stepped forward, offering to interface directly with the AI. "My clearance should allow me to keep it occupied," he said, his voice tight with a mix of fear and determination. Paul hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Do it." As Zar jacked into the system, his body went rigid, his consciousness merging with the AI. The room filled with the sound of blaring alarms as the virus was uploaded, spreading rapidly through the ship's systems. Lights flickered, doors slammed shut, and the ship was plunged into chaos. The Raymonds, caught off guard by the sudden disruption, scrambled to regain control, but the damage was done. The tiny human army had struck their first blow, and it was one that the Raymond Empire would not soon forget. As the humans retreated into the shadows, disappearing into the depths of the ship, rumors of their actions spread like wildfire. The legend of the human popsicles had begun, and with it, the first seeds of rebellion were sown, alliance of necessity. The virus unleashed by the humans had thrown the Raymond Empire into disarray, creating the perfect cover for Paul and his team to continue their mission. However, Paul knew that a single victory would not be enough to turn the tide of war. They needed allies, beings who had suffered under the Raymond's rule and were ready to fight back. Deep within the ship's labyrinthine corridors, Paul sought out Shri Call, a female Cracknid known for her cunning and ruthless tactics against the Raymond oppressors. The Cracknids, an insectoid species with razor-sharp claws and lightning-fast reflexes, had long been subjugated by the Raymonds, their homeworld ravaged and their people enslaved. Paul knew that if he could forge an alliance with Shri Call and her rebels, they would have a fighting chance. The meeting took place in a dimly lit maintenance bay, far from the prying eyes of Raymond security. As Paul waited, every sense on high alert, a shadow detached itself from the gloom. Shri Call emerged, her insectoid features unreadable. "You're either very brave or very foolish, human," she chittered, her mandibles clicking with each word. "Why should I trust you?" Paul met her compound eyes steadily, his voice calm but firm. "Because we both want the same thing, to see the Raymond Empire burn. We've already bloodied their nose. Together we can bring them to their knees." For a long moment, Shri Call studied him, her antennae twitching as she assessed his words. Then, a sound like dry leaves rustling, a Cracknid laugh. "You speak boldly for a species thought extinct," she said. "Very well, Pink Ape. Let us see if your actions match your words." With that, the alliance was forged. The humans and Cracknids would fight side by side, striking at the heart of the Raymond Empire from within. As the details of their plan were hammered out, Paul felt a spark of hope ignite within him. The road ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time since their awakening, they had a real shot at victory. The storm of war, with the alliance between the humans and Cracknids secured, the stage was set for the next phase of their daring rebellion. Paul Bailey and Shri Call wasted no time in coordinating their forces, planning a series of coordinated strikes that would hit the Raymond Empire where it hurt the most. The Raymonds, still reeling from the initial virus attack, were unprepared for the onslaught that was about to be unleashed upon them. The ship's security forces, already stretched thin by the chaos, struggled to respond as sabotage and guerrilla warfare tactics spread like wildfire throughout the vessel. The humans, now armed with advanced Raymond weaponry and supported by the ferocious Cracknid warriors, moved like phantoms through the ship's shadowy innards, striking with precision and vanishing before the enemy could retaliate. The first major target was the ship's primary power core, a massive reactor buried deep within the flagship's bowels. Disabling it would cripple the entire vessel, leaving it vulnerable to further attacks. Paul led the assault personally, his heart pounding with the adrenaline of battle. The route to the power core was heavily guarded with automated turrets and patrols at every turn. But with Zar's insider knowledge and the Cracknids' unparalleled stealth, they managed to outmaneuver the defenses, slipping past undetected. When they finally reached the core, the sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. A towering structure pulsing with energy, the lifeblood of the ship. Mike Hawkins, the team's tech expert, quickly set to work planting charges at critical points, while the rest of the team stood guard. Time was of the essence. They knew the Raymonds would respond swiftly if they were discovered. Just as Mike finished setting the last charge, the alarms blared. They had been found. "Get ready!" Paul barked, raising his weapon as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridors. The Raymond soldiers poured into the chamber, their weapons blazing. The room erupted into a furious firefight, plasma bolts and laser beams crisscrossing the air. The Cracknids, with their natural agility and ferocity, tore into the Raymond ranks, their claws slicing through armor and flesh with terrifying efficiency. Paul and his team fought with everything they had, determined to hold the line until the charges could be detonated. The battle was intense, with casualties mounting on both sides. But even as the situation grew more desperate, Paul's resolve only hardened. They were fighting for the survival of their species, and he would not let this opportunity slip away. "Now!" Paul shouted as Mike gave the signal. The charges detonated with a deafening roar, the explosion sending shockwaves through the ship. The power core was obliterated, and the ship's lights flickered and died, plunging the vessel into darkness. The Raymond soldiers, disoriented and panicked, were quickly overwhelmed by the combined might of the humans and Cracknids. As the last of the enemy forces were subdued, Paul surveyed the devastation they had wrought. The flagship was crippled, its systems in chaos, and the Raymond Empire had been dealt a significant blow. But Paul knew that this was just the beginning. The war was far from over, and the battles ahead would only grow more fierce. With the power core destroyed, the ship was now adrift, vulnerable to further attacks from within and without. But Paul had no intention of letting the Raymonds regroup. They would press the advantage, taking the fight to the enemy's heart and reclaiming the galaxy for humanity and its newfound allies. The tide turns, with the flagship crippled and the Raymonds in disarray. The rebellion began to spread. News of the humans' return and their alliance with the Cracknids reached other oppressed species throughout the galaxy, sparking uprisings on countless worlds. Paul Bailey and his team, now hailed as heroes, became the symbol of hope for all those who had suffered under the Raymond Empire's tyranny. The once dominant empire found itself besieged on all fronts. Its forces stretched thin as they tried to quell the growing resistance. The tide of war was beginning to turn, and for the first time in centuries, the possibility of victory seemed within reach. But the Raymonds were not defeated yet. Desperate to regain control, they unleashed their most feared weapon, the Dreadnought, a massive warship capable of obliterating entire fleets with a single volley. The Dreadnought had been the instrument of humanity's downfall in the last war, and its reappearance sent a wave of dread through the ranks of the rebellion. Paul knew that if they didn't find a way to stop the Dreadnought, all their efforts would be for naught. The stakes had never been higher, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. The Dreadnought, with its impenetrable shields and overwhelming firepower, seemed unstoppable. Conventional tactics were useless against it, and the Raymonds knew it. They brought the Dreadnought to bear against the rebellion's stronghold, a massive space station hidden within an asteroid belt. The station housed the leadership of the rebellion, and its destruction would cripple their efforts. As the Dreadnought approached, Paul and his team scrambled to find a solution. Mike Hawkins, ever the resourceful engineer, proposed a daring plan. The Dreadnought's shields, while powerful, had a brief vulnerability during its weapon recharge cycle, a tiny window of opportunity that could be exploited. But to take advantage of it, they would need to get in close, within striking distance of the ship's main reactor. It was a suicide mission, but it was their only chance. Paul volunteered to lead the assault, knowing that the survival of the rebellion depended on its success. The plan was simple but deadly. A small strike team would infiltrate the Dreadnought, plant charges on its reactor, and detonate them during the shield's vulnerability. Timing was everything, and any mistake would mean certain death. As Paul and his team prepared for the mission, the weight of their task weighed heavily on them. They were about to face the deadliest weapon in the galaxy, and the odds were stacked against them. The assault began with a high-risk maneuver, using the debris of the asteroid belt as cover to approach the dreadnought undetected. As they neared the colossal ship, the sheer scale of it was daunting. The dreadnought was a city in space, bristling with weaponry and defenses. But Paul's team was determined, their resolve steeled by the knowledge that this was their last best hope. They breached the dreadnought's outer hull, slipping inside undetected. The corridors of the ship were a maze, guarded by elite Raymond soldiers and automated defenses. Every step was fraught with danger, but the team moved with precision, their training and determination carrying them forward. As they reached the reactor chamber, the final challenge awaited them. The reactor was heavily guarded, with multiple layers of security designed to prevent exactly the kind of sabotage they were attempting. Paul knew they had no time to waste. They had to move quickly, planting the charges and escaping before the Raymonds could react. But as the last charge was set, disaster struck. The dreadnought's security systems detected the intrusion and the alarms blared. The Raymond soldiers, realizing the danger, flooded the reactor chamber, weapons blazing. Paul's team was pinned down, their escape route cut off. With time running out, Paul made a fateful decision. He ordered the team to fall back, sacrificing himself to manually detonate the charges. As the dreadnought's shields cycled down, Paul triggered the explosion, the resulting blast tearing through the reactor and causing a catastrophic chain reaction. The dreadnought, the symbol of the Raymond Empire's power, was destroyed in a blinding flash of light. Paul's sacrifice was not in vain. The destruction of the dreadnought marked a turning point in the war, breaking the Raymonds' hold on the galaxy and rallying the rebellion to new heights. The dawn of a new era. The destruction of the dreadnought sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy, both literal and metaphorical. The once feared Raymond Empire was now on the defensive, its forces in disarray, its strongholds crumbling one by one. The rebellion, fueled by the hope and determination sparked by Paul Bailey's heroic sacrifice, surged forward with renewed vigor. Planet after planet fell to the rebellion, as species once thought lost to the Raymonds' tyranny rose up to reclaim their freedom. The galaxy was ablaze with the fires of revolution, and the Raymonds, who had once seemed invincible, were now fighting a losing battle. With the Raymond Empire on the brink of collapse, the time had come for the leaders of the rebellion to come together and plan for the future. A new galactic order was needed, one based on cooperation, mutual respect, and the shared goal of ensuring that such tyranny could never rise again. The Cracknid leader, Shri Call, along with representatives from the newly liberated worlds, met at the former Raymond stronghold, now repurposed as the capital of the new alliance. Mike Hawkins, who had taken up the mantle of leadership following Paul's death, was at the forefront of these efforts. He knew that the future of the galaxy depended on the unity and resolve of its people. The process of rebuilding was long and arduous. The scars of the war ran deep, and the wounds of centuries of oppression would not heal overnight. But there was hope. The alliance that had formed in the fires of rebellion was strong, united by a shared vision of a better future. The Cracknids, who had once been feared as ruthless warriors, now stood as protectors of the new order, their claws turned to the task of building rather than tearing down. The humans, once thought extinct, were now seen as symbols of resilience and determination, their survival and ultimate victory serving as an inspiration to all. As the new Galactic Council was formed, Mike Hawkins was appointed as its first leader, a role he accepted with humility and a deep sense of responsibility. His first act was to establish a framework for peace and cooperation, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Under his guidance, the galaxy began to heal, the wounds of war slowly closing as new alliances were forged and old enmities were set aside. The Raymonds, now a shadow of their former selves, were offered a chance at redemption, their surviving leaders brought before the council to answer for their crimes. But rather than being sentenced to death, they were given the opportunity to atone, working alongside their former enemies to rebuild what they had destroyed. Years passed, and the galaxy entered a new era of peace and prosperity. The alliance grew stronger, its influence spreading to the farthest reaches of space. Trade flourished, cultures mingled, and the once divided species of the galaxy found common ground in their shared desire for a better future. The memory of the war, and the sacrifices made to end it, was honored and remembered, serving as a reminder of the cost of freedom and the importance of vigilance. Paul Bailey, whose sacrifice had made it all possible, was immortalized as a hero, his name spoken with reverence across the stars. As Mike Hawkins stood on the observation deck of the newly christened flagship of the Alliance fleet, he looked out at the stars and thought of all they had achieved. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but they had emerged victorious, stronger and more united than ever before. The galaxy, once torn apart by war and tyranny, was now a beacon of hope and possibility, a place where all beings, regardless of their origins, could live in peace and harmony. And as the flagship sailed through the stars, carrying with it the promise of a brighter future, Mike knew that they had truly entered the dawn of a new era, the challenge of peace. As the galaxy settled into its newfound peace, the challenges of governance and reconstruction began to take center stage. The Galactic Concordance, as the new alliance came to be known, was a fragile coalition of diverse species, each with its own culture, priorities, and grievances. Mike Hawkins, now the de facto leader of the Concordance, faced the daunting task of maintaining unity among the members while addressing the myriad issues that arose in the aftermath of the war. The scars of conflict were still fresh, and old rivalries simmered just beneath the surface, threatening to unravel the delicate fabric of peace they had fought so hard to weave. The first major test of the Concordance came when a dispute erupted between two member species, the Vorn and the Tassari, over the control of a resource-rich planet on the fringes of the galaxy. The Vorn, a species of highly advanced engineers, had begun mining operations on the planet, claiming it as their own due to an ancient, long-forgotten treaty. The Tassari, a race of fiercely independent warriors, countered that the treaty was invalid and that the planet belonged to them, as it lay within their ancestral star systems. The conflict threatened to escalate into full-scale war, which would not only destabilize the region, but could potentially tear the Concordance apart. Mike knew that the survival of the Concordance hinged on his ability to mediate this conflict and find a peaceful resolution. He called for an emergency council meeting, bringing together representatives from both species as well as neutral parties to broker a deal. The negotiations were tense, with both sides firmly entrenched in their positions. The Vorn argued their case with cold, logical precision, while the Tassari appealed to their ancestral rights and the honor of their people. For days, the talks dragged on, with little progress made, and tensions continued to rise. Realizing that a compromise was unlikely through traditional means, Mike decided to take a different approach. He suggested a joint venture, where both the Vorn and Tassari would share control of the planet and its resources. The Vorn would bring their technological expertise to bear on the planet's development, while the Tassari would provide security and governance. It was a risky proposition, but one that appealed to the pragmatic minds of the Vorn and the honor-bound Tassari alike. After much deliberation, both sides agreed to the plan, and a potential war was averted. The success of the negotiations strengthened the Concordance, demonstrating the power of cooperation and diplomacy. However, Mike knew that this was just one of many challenges they would face. The galaxy was vast and filled with countless other disputes, many of which had the potential to spiral out of control if not handled carefully. The lessons learned from the Vorn-Tassari conflict would be invaluable as they navigated the complexities of governance in a post-war galaxy. Part 9. The Seeds of Discontent. While the Galactic Concordance was busy establishing itself as a force for peace and stability, not everyone was content with the new order. In the shadows, factions began to emerge, composed of individuals and groups who had been marginalized or who disagreed with the direction the Concordance was taking. Some viewed the Concordance as a new form of tyranny, one that sought to impose its will on the galaxy, just as the Raymond Empire had before it. Others were motivated by old grudges, unwilling to forgive and forget the wrongs done to them during the war. One such faction, known as the Shadow Collective, began to gain influence in the darker corners of the galaxy. Comprised of disillusioned former Raymond soldiers, mercenaries, and political dissidents, the Shadow Collective saw the Concordance as a threat to their way of life. They believed that the galaxy's natural state was one of competition and conflict, and that the Concordance's attempts to impose peace were unnatural and doomed to fail. The collective operated in secret, conducting raids on Concordance supply lines, sabotaging diplomatic efforts, and spreading propaganda to sow discord among the member species. Mike Hawkins and the Concordance leadership were well aware of the growing threat posed by the Shadow Collective, but tracking them down proved to be a nearly impossible task. The collective's cells were scattered across the galaxy, and they operated with a level of secrecy and coordination that rivaled even the most clandestine intelligence agencies. Each time the Concordance managed to neutralize one cell, another would spring up elsewhere, continuing the cycle of violence and disruption. The collective's most audacious move came when they attempted to assassinate Mike Hawkins during a diplomatic mission to a newly liberated world. The attack was swift and brutal, carried out by a team of highly trained operatives. Mike barely escaped with his life, saved only by the quick thinking of his security detail and the intervention of a cracknid bodyguard. The assassination attempt sent shockwaves through the Concordance, shaking the confidence of its members and emboldening those who opposed the new order. In response to the attack, Mike convened a special session of the Concordance Council, calling for a united effort to root out the Shadow Collective once and for all. He emphasized that the fight against the collective was not just a matter of security, but of preserving the very ideals that the Concordance was built upon. The council agreed, and a task force was formed to hunt down and dismantle the collective's network. The task force, comprised of elite operatives from across the Concordance's member species, was given unprecedented authority to pursue the collective wherever they might be hiding. The fight against the Shadow Collective would be long and difficult, testing the resolve and unity of the Concordance at every turn. But Mike Hawkins was determined to see it through, knowing that the future of the galaxy depended on their success. The collective's actions, while disruptive, had inadvertently strengthened the Concordance's resolve, as member species rallied together to confront this common enemy. The battle against the Shadow Collective became a symbol of the ongoing struggle to maintain the hard-won peace, a reminder that the galaxy's transition to a new era was far from complete. A new hope. As the fight against the Shadow Collective intensified, the Galactic Concordance found itself at a crossroads. The success of their efforts to root out the collective would determine the future of the entire galaxy. The task force, led by some of the most skilled and determined individuals the Concordance had to offer, pursued the collective relentlessly, striking at their strongholds, disrupting their operations, and slowly dismantling their network piece by piece. The collective, for all their cunning and ruthlessness, began to lose ground, their influence waning as the Concordance tightened its grip. But the true turning point came when a key member of the Shadow Collective, a former Raymond officer named Commander Varric, was captured during a raid on a secret base. Varric was a high-ranking operative within the collective, responsible for coordinating many of their most devastating attacks. His capture was a significant blow to the collective's morale and operations, and it presented the Concordance with a unique opportunity. Mike Hawkins, ever the diplomat, saw in Varric not just an enemy to be neutralized, but a potential ally who could be turned.